The second I arrived in Budapest, I realized that Orban wasn't going to be in power for much longer, because you could feel it everywhere. His posters were being ripped down. I went straight into the country, into villages and towns that have always voted for Orban, and asked people what they thought of him. And they said that they weren't going to vote again, or they were going to vote for the opposition, because they were tired of the fact that they can't afford the same things anymore. Orban has made Hungary now into the second poorest country in the European Union. Putin treated Hungary like a concierge, really. He would pick up the phone and ask for whatever he wanted, whatever deals he wanted, block whatever information he wanted about the European Union, and it's no longer a concierge.
Russia is losing Europe. Viktor Orban has lost the election, and with him, Vladimir Putin is losing his main ally inside the EU. But the Kremlin is not backing off. It will fight to stay inside Europe's political space and is already looking for ways to keep its influence. At the same time, Russia is stepping up its attacks on Ukraine, while dictator Putin is under pressure from a strained economy. Caolan Robertson is with us in the studio, just got back from Hungary, and we have a lot to unpack. Caolan, welcome. I'm glad to see you again here.
Glad to see you too.
Caolan, you just got back from Hungary. What was your feeling there on the ground when you've heard that Orban has lost?
It was not like any election that I've seen before. It felt more like a festival, like a celebration. All across the bridge that you can see just between us was filled with thousands of people of all different age groups, just ecstatic about the election, about the fact that Orban was out. And I didn't really know that much about the history with Orban for the whole of the 16 years. I knew that he was pretty anti-Ukraine, but I hadn't really realized the extent of the corruption and the rot that had set in, that had just been going on for way over a decade. And the fact that so many young people as well who, even hadn't voted before, or who are over 16 years old, who were born into what they call the Orban regime, Orban baby regime, were just like astounded that for the first time they were entering a new Hungary that was finally free of this. And it was just completely amazing. I mean, all across this entire river, you could hear screams all night. You could see fireworks everywhere. There's videos. You could see older people as well were celebrating with younger people. This one woman jumped out of her car and started just jumping into the air and hugging everyone. It was an atmosphere like I haven't seen in so long, not since I went to Syria and saw exactly the same thing. It was just incredible. And so many people said that they felt like they could breathe again. And one really amazing thing was I was standing on this bridge and someone came up to me and said that for the first time, they're proud to say that they're Hungarian again, that when they go abroad, they can tell people they're Hungarian. And they've been quiet about it for a long time. He said, I'm proud to be from Hungary because we don't have a leader that's in the pocket of Putin. We don't have a leader that's an autocrat that's dragging us east instead of west. And it was amazing, contagious. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. The entire city was erupting. The only time I've ever seen anything like this was when I went to Syria just after the fall of Assad. And there was the same kind of thing, people just celebrating, jumping on cars, streets full of jubilation, because their president, who was working with Putin, had fled to Moscow, had gone. And this was super similar. And it was super similar in the celebrations, but it was also super similar in the environment. But honestly, it was completely unbelievable to see an entire city, the capital of a country, rejoicing. It was amazing. And this happened all night. I could hear it from my apartment all evening. For the next few days, activists had told me that they were waiting for this moment their whole lives. They've been waiting for this moment, this is the first time they voted in so long. And this wasn't just young people in Budapest. People had come to Hungary, people had come to Budapest from all over Hungary to a massive concert that happened just before the election. And it was a concert to speak against corruption and against what has happened to Hungary, a satellite state of Russia, an authoritarian dictatorship slipping closer to Belarus every single day. And that was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. A soldier came up on stage in uniform and said, this might be the last time I ever wear this uniform, but I stood to defend my country, to protect freedom and democracy, and that's why I'm speaking here for you. And that was one of the most incredible, profound moments I've ever seen. And the crowd just went wild because he said, I came here to serve freedom, and that's what I'm fighting for, and that's what you represent. And he said it to the crowd. It was unbelievable, and Hungary got their wish. They voted to be free again, and it's what they got, and it was amazing.
Before you go to the elections in Hungary, you had kind of a feeling, as a journalist, sense of feeling that something gonna change in Hungary. And did you have any doubts that Viktor Orban will win the elections?
I did before I arrived in Budapest. I thought, this is going to be close. Orban's going to rig it. maybe people outside of the capital who aren't very online are still going to be stuck in their old ways, still going to be voting for the same person. The second I arrived in Budapest, I realized that Orban wasn't going to be in power for much longer, because you could feel it everywhere. His posters were being ripped down. I went straight into the country, into villages and towns that have always voted for Orban, and asked people what they thought of him. And they said that they weren't going to vote again, or they were going to vote for the opposition, because they were tired of the fact that they can't afford the same things anymore. Orban has made Hungary now into the second poorest country in the European Union. His voters can see crystal clear his things like his palace in the countryside, the thing that I flew a drone over. They can see how he's been living. They can see the cronyism. They can see the corruption, and they are completely sick of it. And a lot of his voters, older people, lived through Soviet occupation, lived and saw the Soviet tanks roll through the city on the screen behind us, roll through Budapest, and they remember the regime, the brutal dictatorship, and they want nothing to do with it. They don't want to go back to those days. One of the happiest days that older people remember in Hungary are the days of the fall of the Soviet Union. And when they see their prime minister on the phone to Vladimir Putin saying that he is his servant, saying that Hungary is his servant, they see those dark days again. There was a statue that was standing right over the top of Budapest of Joseph Stalin, and all that's left of it are the boots, because Hungarians tore that statue down in 1957 in a rebellion and an uprising against the Soviet Union. And Orban slowly rebuilt that statue, tried to, piece by piece, and Hungarians tore it down again, very symbolically, at the voting box. And it was amazing to see. So the second I got there, this was the environment that I was arriving in. And I could feel the energy at this concert, hundreds of thousands of people excited to be there with their kids, with their families, excited to enter freedom again, right? A stage away from what they've been living under. And then the moment I knew that he definitely wasn't getting in was when I went to Orban's rally the night after the festival. And it was like going to a funeral. I mean, it was literally demon vibes. I mean, it was just like, we walked in, there was kind of like there was kind of like flames everywhere. There was this kind of fire.
Darkness, like, you know, monks, not monks, but something super, I don't know,
it
depressing, I would say.
It was depressing, yeah. And it was held in this kind of like old Gothic kind of vibe church overlooking the city. All the colors were red, it was dark, it felt like the last, and you know, Orban came on stage, and I've never seen Orban before in person, and I never really heard him speak. But he kind of like came onto this stage looking exhausted. He grabbed onto his lectern like he was grabbing on for, you know, dear life at the end of his dictatorship, and just kind of started screaming and shouting and rasping. It was honestly like a meme version of what I thought of Orban. Like, he kind of looked like a goblin, honestly. It was really, really bizarre, like a cartoon villain. And he was going on and on and on about how Kyiv was the worst place on earth. Zelensky was mentioned 50 times. Ukraine was to blame for everything. Everyone else was to blame. The war, Brussels, everyone except for Orban. And this was his last rally. And the last rally of an election speech, the last rally of an election cycle should be the moment that you get your last voters out to the booth. You get them excited, you get them riled up, and he spent it lamenting Ukraine and blaming everyone else for the problems that he has created in his country except for himself. The war, Brussels, everyone except for Viktor Orban. And that kind of is a fitting end to his legacy. But anyway, that night, there was barely anyone there. There were people walking away from his rally towards the end. I filmed this and videoed it. There were literally people walking out as it was happening. Orban had been paying people up to $130 per head for his votes. He was buying votes with food, with drugs, with all sorts of things. So whoever had turned up, you know, looked like they were just paid from across the country. They were shipped in from everywhere, and they didn't really want to bother seeing there. They were off to the pub halfway through the conversation. And it was kind of like that moment that I realized that this was over, that there was no energy around him, because people in Hungary are sick of him. And unless you're being paid $130, why on earth are you going to go and listen to a man who has destroyed your country? Literally, that's what it was like.
Okay. You know, there are a lot of analytic articles saying that Peter Magyar may be not an Orban, but definitely we shouldn't call him a pro-Ukrainian. So I know that Prime Minister of Hungary should be pro-Hungarian at first, and then the other things, especially in external policy. So from your perspective, Peter Magyar, who is he? He's definitely not the second Orban, right?
So he's not a savior for Ukraine, but he's also not a saboteur for Ukraine. And that's what Orban was. He was sabotaging the aid to Ukraine. He was sabotaging Ukraine's intelligence. He was sending operatives into here. Ukraine didn't gain a new best friend. Ukraine doesn't doesn't need a new best friend. It just doesn't need a room full of arsonists, and it's just one less arsonist, right?
Yes.
So we know that he's not going to be a champion for Kyiv, but he's also not going to be a champion for Moscow, and that's what's so critically important. You know, this isn't some sort of godsend, but a very good indication of this is he stood up on stage a couple of days ago, this week, and pointed to the Russian press and laughed at them and said, you know, you don't get freedom like this in Moscow.
Why?
Because he doesn't like the Russians.
Okay, you mean freedom like this in Moscow because of the elections, right? The result of it.
Yeah, he was like, I hope you're enjoying your freedom here, as in, you know, he's making fun of them, he's laughing at them. And the crowd started cheering, Ruski has Russians go home. So it's no longer a playground for the Russians. That's something that's really good to know. It's no longer sort of a satellite state.
Let me welcome the Russian propaganda here in Pliskun Látszháza. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming and enjoy the freedom here in Hungary. And the regime change as well. Thanks.
You know, Putin treated Hungary like a concierge, really. He would pick up the phone and ask for whatever he wanted, whatever deals he wanted, block whatever information he wanted about the European Union. And it's no longer a concierge. And that's what's really, really cool. But that phrase was everywhere, Russia out. I thought it was maybe just a few small chants. I saw it on Twitter, but I heard that chanted through the streets constantly. After the big festival as well that had happened, I was walking through the central promenade of Budapest and people were screaming, Russia out, Russia out. Everyone was screaming this because people felt it. They could feel the Russian influence. They saw the phone calls that the foreign minister had of Hungary to the foreign minister of Russia. Mm-hmm. And the country, Hungary, was colonized by the Soviets, just like Ukraine was, just like the Baltics was, and they want nothing to do with it. So the prime minister knows that as well. And I think the fact that he treated the press like that, and the fact that he says we're going to put an end to Russian influence, and the fact that he said those involved in Russian collusion, those involved in Russia collusion, spreading papers, we're coming after you, the courts are coming after you. The Hungarian army have now seized the shredded paper that I was filming with yesterday, and they're going to use AI to unshred that and find out what was going on. And I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of people from Orban's cabinet getting on a plane and going to Moscow very, very soon to hide. So no, Hungary isn't going to, it's a very different environment for the Russians. They're a lot less welcome. And it's great to see. It's really good.
Everybody's running away to Moscow. Yanukovych did, Bashar Assad did. Yeah, so no, I wouldn't be surprised. Yes, and I was thinking that if Orban has lost, is Putin really losing his influence in Europe? Because as I said in my intro, they definitely will not give up. They are trying to have pragmatic diplomatic ties with a new leader, Peter Mader, but also they are working on ties with Bulgaria. I know that Bulgaria is an ally of Russia. They have sympathy to them. But, I mean, what do you think coming next?
The Russians are going to go wherever the next election is in Europe. That's what they love to do. If they lose somewhere, Putin is very persistent. He is annoyed about this, but that doesn't mean he's devastated and it's all over. He's just going to look at the next election, wherever it is, and interfere and meddle with that. That's just the unfortunate reality of it. I mean, it will probably be where you've just mentioned. It'll probably be in France when there's another election there. But at least people know every time. And their support is diminishing overall in Europe. So it's hard to tell.
Yeah, and finalizing your trip to Hungary, do you think that there is a serious geopolitical shift happened after the elections?
After Hungary. So, I mean, this is a gigantic political shift. This is one of the most pro-Russian and anti-democratic hostile countries in the European Union, no longer ruling the reign, no longer with just having its leadership removed. So I think this is a hugely historic election. And it is a return to democracy for a country that has been living under authoritarian rule for nearly 20 years. It's amazing. And there's a lot of people right now who are trying to say that, you know, there's a lot of like MAGA right-wingers right now who are saying, actually, this is a massive own because the new prime minister is more right-wing than Orban and this is all ridiculous. I don't know if you've seen this.
No.
So actually it's the worst. Yeah, okay, he is more right-wing than Orban in some ways.
No, I saw it, sorry. Yeah,
but that's to do with immigration, closed borders. And to be fair, most Hungarians want that. So there's nothing wrong with that. But what it it's a move away from Russia, and that's why it's very historic. And right-wingers don't like that. So the right-wing agitators on Twitter are furious right now because Orban is out. Not because of any ideological reason. The new prime minister is more conservative than Viktor Orban when it comes to immigration, when it comes to a lot of policy. What they're annoyed about is the fact that he's not pro-Russia like those people are. And the main reason is that CPAC isn't going to get funded by Hungarian pensioners anymore, by taxpayers. And all this came out this week because the new prime minister basically released a dossier saying CPAC, this big American MAGA-first clown show that happens here every single year for the last 4 years that you are paying for, we're not going to pay for it anymore. And this show, CPAC used to fly in all the very, very, very big far-right agitators, Ian Malmström type people from all over the world, Jack Posobiec, all of these, right into the capital, and they used to repeat Kremlin lies, Kremlin lines, super crazy talking points. And that gig is over. So these people aren't mad because of a change of policies. They're just pissed off because their sugar daddy is gone. Their authoritarian sugar daddy. It's really embarrassing. And it's embarrassing as well because, you know, CPAC is like red-blooded Americana. And it was funded by Putin's puppet and old Hungarian pensioners, taxpayers. It doesn't feel very pro-American, very Western, but I mean, I don't make the rules.
And yeah, I said this is my final question, but still, I just recall the video you made about, speaking about corruption, because Hungary, they love to point about corruption in Ukraine. We know we have some, and we have a lot, unfortunately, but it was always a public issue, always becoming public in Ukraine. But what, you know, I was surprised about the circle you were filming, the road circle that Hungarian government spent more than €1 million for it. Could you just please elaborate? How did you find out about that circle?
While I was driving through the Hungarian countryside, it was scattered with Orban's corruption, with Orban's legacy. It kind of looked like performance art all over the place. Like it kind of looked like oligarch performance art. Sort of like joke sculptures all over the place, half-finished roundabouts, benches in the middle of nowhere. There were these kind of wooden structures that were just left all over the place in the distance. And the way that this works is, and this is why it's very representative of his legacy, is Viktor Orban, who laments and lambasts and hates on Brussels 24/7, had enriched himself and his friends using expensive EU contracts. Hungary are one of the top 5 biggest receivers of European money after Poland. So 400 kilometers of road has been built in the last few years from European finances. Everywhere you go in Hungary, I was driving around cycle routes, walking around back lanes, all brand new EU funding. The asphalt under Orban's feet is EU money while he's complaining about Brussels. And the roundabout was basically a very comical symbolism of this. It was 1.3 million euros given to build a roundabout next to a train station that would then bring that local village closer to Budapest. And the way it works there is the contracts come in, a couple of million euros. They get given to Orban's friends, Orban's loyalists, Orban's family, whoever these people are. And they start the project, put a ribbon on it and say, okay, right, we're making progress, things are going well. And then they say, uh-oh, parts haven't arrived, we don't have any more money, we can't pay for this anymore, we need more. And the EU says no, and then they get to pocket a huge amount of the money through the contracts, and it never gets finished. This is 101 how Orban ran that racketeering ring. And what is the most ironic, again, is the entire countryside is covered in these projects, right? And there's even EU signs still outside these projects. There was an EU sign right outside the roundabout that I drove past and filmed that said, proudly paid for by the EU. But that is his legacy. It's nationalism built on foreign money, nationalism built on foreign influence, the Kremlin. It's nationalism built on foreign money, the European Union, nationalism built on foreign influence, Russia, and cronyism, giving all the money to his friends and his family. And again, this stuff was just all over the place. But I went to that roundabout because I didn't even believe it was true. I was like, surely not. Or surely they've like covered it up.
But this roundabout, it's so pointless. I saw it from, I mean, you was filming it from a drone. I was like, what? It's not leading anywhere.
No, it's a bit like his legacy. It's just like a road to nowhere. Yeah, locals called it a circle of bullshit. It's ridiculous. But no, because they built the roundabout first, and then they should have built the roads connected. But it's a great symbolism. I think that they should keep that roundabout there forever as like a memorial to Orban's legacy. They should memorialize it. They should build a highway to it so that people can go and visit it.
And I want to just make a point. I'm not laughing about from their corruption for no reason, because we have our own. But the fact that Viktor Orban was blocking the financial support for Ukraine for a many long time, and financial support for Ukraine when it's fighting against Russian aggression means more weapon and more support, more financial support, more protection. And while Russia is attacking us, while I'm scrolling my Instagram or just the news full of funerals of kids that died after recent Russian attack, I'm not just saying that I have my right to, just to point to the corruption that's happening in Hungary. Definitely, because they were just so humiliating Ukraine and blocking a lot of decisions connected to us for no reason.
Yeah, and kidnapping bank workers and
kidnapping bank workers for and blackmailing us for that. I want to shift right now our attention from the Hungary and your excellent performing there and reports and investigation to the situation in the United States, but more specifically about what J.D. Vance recently said about military support of Ukraine. He said that he's proud of the fact that they are not giving us a weapon to protect ourselves for free right now, that they will sell it, and they are doing it, and now they just completely stopped any support for Ukraine. Everything they're gonna give us from now on is gonna be specifically for money, from European money. So how did you meet that idea? And the American president also was complaining that he was blaming Biden's administration for everything, that they were involved in this Russia's war in Ukraine, they shouldn't help us and give us money. So what was your reaction? And especially considering the fact that just a few days ago was a horrible attack after so-called Easter ceasefire, which was not a ceasefire, definitely. So how do you see everything?
You know, the fact that J.D. Vance said that isn't surprising. He works for the Trump administration. Trump thinks that soldiers are losers. Trump is a billionaire draft dodger. These people don't respect military. They don't respect veterans. They don't respect democracy. They don't respect what Ukraine is fighting for, which is democratic freedom. They're pissed off that their friend Orban is out of power because that's another one of their dictator friends, like Putin, who just lost his seat. And people like J.D. Vance have no interest in Ukraine. He's probably never going to visit Ukraine. And so it's not surprising that he said that. This is everything he embodies. He embodies a coward who despises real freedom and real courage, like what the soldiers in Ukraine are doing every single day. He feels threatened by it. He diminishes it. This is the exact same way that Trump speaks about Ukraine. So it wasn't surprising at all. I mean, the Trump administration, from the beginning, are responsible for the US aid drying up and the American money drying up. This is what they boast about as their best achievement, not the fact that Donald Trump has dragged America further down the economic scale, has dragged America into yet another war without promising it. But on top of that, one of their biggest achievements now, apparently, that they're most proud of, isn't just destroying the United States' reputation, it's also turning their back on one of its allies that is currently defending democracy in Europe. So it's just an absolute farce. At this point, the best thing to do is to no longer speak to the Trump administration, to J.D. Vance or to Donald Trump, to cut off all communications and just to ignore this completely. That doesn't mean Americans. If you're an American and you're watching this, that doesn't mean you at all. Ukrainians and the people that I know here still separate the voters of the United States and the regular everyday people that still love Ukraine and still love freedom to what's happening with Donald Trump. But he, every single day, is becoming more openly pro-authoritarian and openly pro-dictatorship. And so right now they're lashing out to another one of their friends has been overthrown, that Orban's gone, that their CPAC grift isn't going to get funded anymore by Hungary. Yeah, it's just horrible. It's really horrible.
I was reading the latest analysis of Western journalists saying that in Europe, even those who were admiring Trump, they are just, after J.D. Vance supported and endorsed Viktor Orban in Hungary and that guy has lost, they're like, oh no, thank you, don't support us anymore, don't endorse us. Like Marine Le Pen even said, thank you, we're good. So you mean that they are just worried, and I mean, something is cracking more and more between the United States and Europe, but I think it's still too early to say about that. So do you think that the United States right now definitely distracted by their own war with Iran, and they are stepping back from their negotiation process in Russia's war against Ukraine?
I don't think they had any expectation of doing any kind of negotiation in the front place. I think looking back at everything now, Trump had no anticipation, expectation, or desire to help in any way the situation in Ukraine. He's more distracted by Iran because his voter base are upset about it, but he has never been a help to Ukraine. You know, he boasts that he gave javelins or something back a few years ago, or donated some money to javelins a few years ago. But all he says about this is the fact that he never started this war. It's Biden's war. He wanted it over with in minutes because he thought that Putin was his best friend, didn't realize that Putin was using him as a useful idiot. And when he realized that, he just moved on. So I don't expect the American government or Trump to do anything differently. I'm glad they're saying this stuff out loud now. I'm glad they're saying out loud that their proudest moments are not supporting a country fighting for freedom, because at least it's on the record. But at this point, Europeans are switching off when they hear anything from the United States government. You know, the fact that J.D. Vance showed up to try and keep Orban in power and his approval rating dropped by 3% the next day tells you everything you need to know about his reputation and Trump's reputation right now. The fact that Marine Le Pen, like you said, actually, we don't really want your endorsement, says exactly the same thing. People in the democratic world are switching off. They're not listening to Donald Trump anymore. They're not listening to any of it anymore because they see it as a complete waste of time. And that is because they turned their backs on Ukraine. And it's one of the most staining moments of history for America in its hundreds of years, is what they did now.
That's a good point, because I also was reading the analysis, and they were saying that Trump right now is complaining about NATO, that they're completely useless, they're not allies because they are not supporting him in Strait of Hormuz in Iran. But at the same time, experts are pointing to that. Do you remember how united NATO members were when they have to support Ukraine in Russia's war? So I think it's just a good point that everybody knows when they have to be united and when they are just, you know, fighting for their own interests in case of not joining Donald Trump in the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. But let's move on to the next one that I'm recently seeing more and more, and a lot of journalists saying that Russian dictator Putin is kind of cornered right now. Do you see it that way? Because they're saying that cornered dictator, putting in the corner, I don't know, does that make sense for you, right? The dictator who are in the corner, he's gonna be more dangerous. I don't know, as a Ukrainian, I don't see any more dangerous dictator. I mean, he's killing all of us every single day. So, but still, I mean, maybe more for Europe dangerous than for Ukraine so far.
Very often I talk about, you know, Putin being concerned, Putin being worried. That doesn't mean Putin's going to stop. Again, he is incredibly persistent with what's going on. The fact that Russians are pissed off right now, the fact that people are complaining in Russia, the fact he has to shut off the internet, the fact he's lost Orban, the fact he lost Maduro, the fact he lost Assad over the last year and a half. These are blows to Putin, but they're not the death of Putin. And Russia, again, it is the most fickle and persistent and irritating state in the world, because it will carry on and drag its civilians into the abyss to achieve their ridiculous imperialist mindsets and goals. This week, they've changed the legislation to say that it's legal to invade more foreign countries. Not that that really makes any difference. They did it here multiple times since 2014. It looks like there's something happening in Belarus right now. The roads layouts are being changed, new infrastructure is being built.
That was my next question. Yes, yes.
So that's concerning for... So Russia doesn't have the ability to increase its attacks right now with manpower against anywhere, because they are doing everything they can in Ukraine to steal the Donbass. That has still not happened, so they can extend that. If there's a mass mobilization in Belarus, which it seems like Russia's trying to push, then that would be concerning. But Zelensky tweeted yesterday saying, if that happens and our intelligence will find out, then you'll end up like Maduro, and basically joking, but probably being serious, that they'd kidnap the president and take him here to Kyiv, and we could all visit him at the Kyiv Zoo or whatever. So that would be interesting. But it seems like kind of empty words, like kind of empty language. You know, Belarus, the people in Belarus are extremely poor. The president has a low approval rating. If he was to do a mass mobilization, I don't think it would work. People would rebel very quickly against that.
And I hope, and I don't really see that in Belarus they're spreading such a lot of anti-Ukrainian propaganda as well. But I have to check, because I know that they are just broadcasting a lot of Russian TV, Russian propaganda. So maybe they don't have to do their...
Yeah, I mean, they could fire drones into the Baltics and into the rest of the EU, which would cause a lot of damage because the EU, NATO doesn't know how to shoot down a drone without expending $1 million missile and missing 5 times out of 10. So that would cause some damage, but there's not much really more that they can do than that without Ukraine's help.
Yeah, we've been threatened by Belarus for many times, and they were launching rockets and drones for their own territory. But, well, yeah, when Ukrainian president saying that they are building roads and some military bases next to our border, you're just worrying a bit, but not more than it was before.
Yeah, they blew those bridges as well. Like I was up near Pripyat like a year ago, you know, just next to Chernobyl, and the giant suspension bridge between there and the Belarus border, you know, that's gone now. All those bridges are gone. It would be pretty hard to try and replicate what happened in 2022 now without those bridges. So I don't know, they could use the new positions as like new launch positions for missiles and things like that, but Russia's pretty expensed right now giving those missiles to Iran in their war. It feels, I was surprised when I saw it because if Zelensky tweets something, it's real intelligence, right? This is like a legitimate thing. But I don't think it's something that Ukrainians should worry about anytime soon.
Yeah, and you know what? The more I read about Russian bloggers complaining about Russian political systems, about dictator Putin, about the top leaders in the Kremlin, I'm like, what the heck is going on there? Why they are so massively complaining about the system and, you know, the internet blocking, of course, affecting them because they are bloggers. So, I mean, I was reading the analysis as well because I'm reading that the analysis a lot, and they were saying that something is shifting in the political system, and probably someone is trying to push aside a Russian dictator.
Putin's new approval ratings have just been released, and it shows way back before 2022. And he's just experienced his biggest drop in 2026 because the internet is down. Much more of a drop than 2022, which tells you that Russians are far more upset with losing internet than their country invading and trying to steal their neighbor, which is tells you everything you need to know about their priorities. Absolutely terrible. But Putin launched this war to try and increase his approval ratings, right? They were already declining steadily, and this is what dictators do when they try and get public support up. But this is people who are pissed they can't go on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, order Deliveroo, pay for stuff with their cards, use the internet in Moscow. And that, I mean, it's hard to tell what's going to happen with that. I think if there ever is a tipping point where people really try and overthrow Putin, it won't be because of any moral reason of what their country has done to all their neighbors for the last few decades. It'll be because they can't go on social media, which is just like, oh my God. I mean, it's just very depressing. But I don't see him being thrown out of a window anytime soon. I don't see him, you know, this doesn't feel likely yet. I think the walls are closing in a little bit more. He can feel like the oxygen is getting less, it's getting tighter, people are getting more pissed off, people are losing money. But, you know, again, Putin is very persistent and very violent, and he's going to continue, I think, for a while. But again, it shows the priorities of those around him, and Russians, you know, they're more upset that they can't go on TikTok than what they did in Bucha.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. Russians they don't have any pity for us. They're just sad because they don't have normal prices for food or something like that, or the internet connection and access.
He is isolating himself more and more and more away from anyone in power, away from oligarchs and people like this. You know, he's in rooms that are lit artificially, so no one even knows through photos of him what time it is where he is, what time zone he is, where he is. He's living in a complete state of paranoia, you know, as he should be. Just based on what I'm hearing, you know, I spoke to my friend who's in Donbass this morning, and she said she's in Kramatorsk. There are FPVs hitting the city more than ever. They're being launched from Shaheeds now as mother drones. Things are getting very, very dark and difficult there yet again. And it's important to talk about the pressure that Russia is under and the pressure that Putin's under, but it's also good to not pretend like everything is fine and that Russia's going to collapse anytime soon, because you know, things are still ongoing, and things are still very difficult, and Russians are still throwing everything they can at Ukraine, and they're not going to stop until they are stopped and until the country is completely destroyed economically, which hopefully will happen. You know, Ukraine hit 7 drones into Shadow Fleet ships again in the last few days. If you read the Russian newspapers, yesterday they talk about yet more economic decline, more economic problems. You know, that is a second war that Ukraine is fighting right now, a war against Russia's economy. And that would definitely stop this. And that's what all the hopes are on right now.
And last week, there was a meeting of a Russian dictator with Putin, with Ministry of Economy representatives. And there was a Chinese journalist sitting there on the meeting, and Putin was so pissed off. Well, according to them, they haven't seen Putin like this ever. It's not in his, temper and behavior to do like that on camera. So, or just being seen by someone, especially by journalists, especially by Western journalists. So he was kind of mad because of economic strain.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. He would be. He's tried to bring Russia back to its great glory days, and he's brought it back to the Soviet days, and now he's bringing it back to the dark ages, without even internet. It's really this is why he's in despair right now.
But at the same time, to be honest, despite the fact that they have problems in their economy, we were reading from the Ukrainian intelligence that they're going to intensify attacks on Ukraine many times more. Maybe they're going to have, at least from what we have heard, 7 huge attacks on Ukraine every month. This is serious. I think they just have used, according to the Institute for the Study of War, they've used this so-called Easter ceasefire just to collect more drones and rockets.
Yeah, the Easter ceasefire was mainly used as a photo opportunity to pretend that they're a Christian moral nation and to pretend that they care about peace. They do this every year. They broke it last year within 4 minutes. They broke it this year within 10 seconds. The fact that the media still cover this ceasefire stuff is ridiculous. The international media talk about it as if Putin has discovered Christ and now wants peace. And wants to go to church and stop the killing is absolutely absurd. It's just a PR press opportunity. But yeah, it was used very likely to reamass. Because when a country is lashing out, and a dictatorship like Russia, especially at its last grasps or its peak of desperation, that's when attacks against civilians intensify the most. And when this war is over, it's going to be difficult in the final days. This is when Russia will throw everything at Ukraine, and it will be brutal and horrific, and it will be darkest before dawn. So it's going to be hard. There's going to be many hard times ahead. I think both of us can feel this.
I can feel this, and I was listening a lot of political analysts and military analysts saying that before the end of the war, something potentially horrible can happen. Just it's not like prediction in a way of some astrology. It's just the fact that could happen.
Yeah, it will, and Ukraine will be as ready as it can to deal with this. But it will be over. That's what's so important to remember. Even though the darkest days might still be to come, it will still be over. One day, this can't carry on forever. In 2 months, this will have gone on for longer than World War II. In June this year, and World War II ended with the fascists losing. That's how this war will end.
100%. I believe in that. Thank you, Caolan.
You too.